All right. Good evening, everybody. It is day number, what is it? What are we at right now, folks? We are at day number 28.
What are we at right now, folks?
28 of 365. Discussing the greatest book ever written. Well, it's not exactly a discussion because I'm talking about my interpretation of this book. And I have tried to get this radio thing going, so hopefully I can do some things there. So I appreciate. Hey, Jim, how are you? Is it day 28 or day 29? Hold on. Yeah, no, day 28. Okay, yeah, day 28 of 365. Okay. 28 of 365. Let me just post this real quick. Greatest book written. How are you, Jim? Hi, Cheryl. How are you? God bless you too. God bless you too, Donna and Jules. Jules, I did get an email from you. I have not really responded to very many emails today. I've been super busy. I did have my sister come over, and she came over this afternoon, which was very nice. And I'm good, thank you. And thanks, Jim, for asking. And basically, she came over to have dinner. She came over this afternoon. We had a great time. She just left. She said she might listen to this on the car ride home, but she wanted to get home at a reasonable hour. So I totally understand. And so, it's kind of cool that she had time to come over and see me and the family and stuff. It's always a wonderful thing to see family and, to break bread. And, I guess there's a lot of bread breaking that takes place in the Old Testament. So I'm curious to see how much of that takes place in the New Testament once we get to it. So with that, let's get into Exodus 5. And actually, this is super quick. Exodus 5 is not that long. The next one is much longer. Moses went to the Lord. Why have you brought all this trouble on your own people? Why did you send me? And ever since I came to Pharaoh as your spokesman, he's caused more grief, right? Does it sound familiar, folks? Sometimes when you expose the problems, it creates a whole new slew of problems. And so Moses doing what he did, speaking on behalf of God, exposing the truth to the Jews, brought about more pain and aggravation to the Jewish people by the Pharaoh and by the Egyptians. So this is super quick. It's only like not even 4 sentences. Anyways, this was the key thing in this quick little version of version on the Bible. But I do think that we can all probably relate to that. In the world today, there's certain individuals that are attempting to do what Moses has done in the past, and essentially, it might cause a little more pain and grief for everybody who does step up and act in accordance with their values and their beliefs because somebody else inspired them to act. There's an old saying, there's few people that step up at first, they get attacked, then more people step up after that person or that group is attacked, they also get attacked, and then at some point it's like a waterfall, everybody steps up, and the attacks cease to exist, and then they get stopped in their tracks. And I'm not exactly sure where we are in the process. I think we might be somewhere in between the first people being attacked. They're just indifferent anymore. They're kind of numb to it, and then what ends up happening is the next round is coming in, and they're fighting, and then more people are paying attention. And they're still being attacked, but once again, they don't care about the attempts to be silenced, and that's that. And I guess you can say, from my perspective, as I'm doing this, as I'm on YouTube, as I'm on social media, you know, the reality is, folks, I really appreciate everybody taking the time to watch and share this whole experience with me. But 3-4 months ago, 5 months ago, you didn't know who I was, and your life was just fine. It was just kind of going about your business. I was going about my business, and I've kind of heard some people say, "Oh, Bobby, you can do something with this, and maybe try to turn it into a business or everything else." And I'm like, you know what? If something else positive comes about as a result of this, great. But I don't have any expectations that anything will happen. Maybe this will be here for a certain amount of time. I'll do my part, and then I'm going to move on and do what it is that life calls me to do. I don't have any expectations of what it should be. I just know that I'm going to behave and speak the truth as I see it, and kind of let the chips fall where they may. But I don't have any expectations of what should happen. Maybe it turns into something much bigger than I can ever imagine. Maybe it just kind of fizzles off, and that's okay too. So I really don't have any attachment, folks, to what should happen. I do hope, at a minimum, that people do feel it's worthwhile, that everybody who's listening finds it somewhat beneficial, and that it helps their life and helps them get a little more clarity as to what they should do and so forth. And maybe it gives them gives everybody some reason or things to look into a little more in more detail for themselves, from the Bible, from the markets, from everything that I'm talking about. And is because I'm enjoying the ride. I'm enjoying there's a song by Pearl Jam, and it basically says, I'll take the wave where, I'll ride the wave where it takes me. I don't have any expectations of what the wave should be. I just enjoy the ride and just do my part to hopefully not disappoint and stay true and honest to who I am and, the message of Christ in this case, because of what we're discussing. And then when I'm talking about the markets, I'll try to stay true and honest to what I see in the markets. And people either want to look into it or see it, or they don't, and that's okay. So let's go into Exodus 6. So the Lord told Moses, "Now you will see what I will do to the Pharaoh. He will feel the force of my strong hand. He will let the people go. In fact, he will force them to leave." Okay, so this is pretty interesting, right? Because we've kind of talked about this a little bit before with regards to, Moses is being told by God, "Don't worry, I'm going to tell you a bunch of things that you need to do. It's going to feel as though you're losing, but in fact you're winning. And hold the line, stay the course, and victory will be yours. You have to have faith." And this is an extremely powerful story. God basically tells Moses that I will let you suffer a bunch of small losses on purpose. You will be tested. So in a sense, God basically told Moses that he was going to shake his faith before his faith was shaken, which is pretty interesting. So you kind of got an inside look into how God was thinking of this problem about shaking the Pharaoh, as well as this, this mentality of treating human beings as slaves, shaking it to its core. And so it's a wonderful story, because he basically said, not only you're asking to leave and the Pharaoh does not want you to leave, I will create such heartache and misery for the Pharaoh that he will beg you to leave. He will be trying to force you out. So at first, He will hold you captive when he thinks he has control over you. But the moment he realizes that he no longer has control over you and that God is in control, he will force you out of Egypt, which is essentially what happened, right? And then obviously it's almost like those different stages of grief. At first he's in denial. There's the stage of denial. Then there's grief for his son being lost because he basically he refused to listen to God's word, listen to do God's bidding. So the Pharaoh ended up losing his son, and so then it turned into anger. I can't believe this happened to me. I'm going to try to get even the score with God. Never a really good idea, folks. You're never going to get even with God. God can do what God wants. And so the sooner you come to that realization and acceptance, the much easier and less stressful your life will be. And so it's pretty cool from that perspective. This story covers a lot of ground about how things work, how our emotions work on an individual level. So if you think of Pharaoh and the country, like Moses and the interaction between peoples in a country, and you personify it on a personal level with your family and friends and how you behave and so forth, I think that you will definitely draw connections to this story to your own life at various points in time. Maybe to this point in time, maybe from the past. And if you're, maybe you haven't had this happen yet, but don't be shocked if you do, where something along the lines of what's told in the story occurs to you. So then the ancestors of Moses and Aaron, there's a big list. You guys can read it yourself. I don't really need to discuss it. But, there's all the descendants are listed. There's quite a few. Okay, so then Aaron and Moses named in this list are the same ones to whom the Lord said, lead the people of Israel out of the land of Egypt like an army. Hold on one second. Hey, Kara? Kara? Okay, sorry. I thought my dog was acting a little weird. Hold on one second, folks. 1 second. You want the dogs up? Okay. Sorry about that, folks. Someone was at the door. I was trying to figure out what that sound was. I thought the dog was scratching, so I'm sorry. And my daughter didn't hear me because I needed to make sure the dogs went outside, that there's no accident in the house. So anyways, my bad. I apologize. So, Aaron and Moses were named on the list as the ones to whom the Lord said, lead the people of Israel out of the land of Egypt like an army. It was Moses and Aaron who spoke to Pharaoh, the king of Egypt, about leading the people of Israel out of Egypt. When the Lord spoke to Moses in the land of Egypt, he said to him, I am the Lord. Tell Pharaoh, the king of Egypt, everything I am telling you. But Moses argued with the Lord, saying, I can't do it. I'm such a clumsy speaker. Why would the Pharaoh listen to me? And so, it's interesting because that was Exodus 6. Oftentimes, I think we probably all feel like this at some respect. In some respect, we get messages, we have dreams, we have thoughts, we have things, intuitions that appear in our lives, and they come out of nowhere, right? Our brains are pretty complicated, and our spirit is probably even more complicated. I do believe it's more complicated. It's more complicated than our brains, because our spirit is tied to something far larger than our brains. And so we pull in all this information, we pull in this data, we pull in these insights, and it can be confusing at times. I'm sure all of us have kind of felt like that. It's like, where the hell did that come from? Like you're just sitting there thinking, you're going about your day, and then something flows into your mind, something flows into your spirit. And so Moses saying what he said about who am I to speak to the Pharaoh and bring this message? I'm clumsy. I think in some respects, every one of us at times feels a bit clumsy. We don't know how sure we are about the thoughts that we're having. And, the best way to get clarity on our thoughts, on our emotions, is to pray more and to ask for guidance and to look at guideposts and knowledge that's been given to us, in the greatest book ever written, for example. You should take the time to read the greatest book ever written. And even for people that are not religious, if you take the time to read it and use the stories as a guidepost for the thoughts that enter your mind, for the feelings that you have that touch your spirit, I do believe that it will help bring you peace and understanding and reasoning for how you do make decisions that you have to make. You'll have a little more confidence, and you'll be a little less uncertain, and I guess you can say less clumsy. And because this clumsiness occurs in all of us. And if you think about every single human being right now, I would argue in the United States and a lot of people around the world, but in particular the United States, we have far more education, far more resources, far more insight, far more everything than Moses ever had. And I know that's a tough thing to really wrap your head around, but think about all of us right now. We're speaking through I'm speaking through a device. You're listening through this device. We designed the internet, human beings did. We're communicating through unbelievable technology. We probably don't have to worry about our home being heated. Everybody who's listening, they're probably in a comfortable temperature. Throughout the whole year. Winter, it's warm, and summer, it's nice and cool. We have all these benefits and vehicles that drive us around anywhere in our state, our area, and food at a whim, and everything is refrigerated and the stove. We have all these luxuries, and we have all these thoughts and knowledge and thinking that people back then that are written about in the Bible couldn't even conceive. They would think that was godlike, like to have all these conveniences that we currently have. And so we all have a tremendous leg up to take the message of Christ, take the message of the Bible, and make more of it than anybody who's listed in the Bible if we choose to. The question is, do we want to? And do we believe in ourselves enough to read the message, to incorporate it in our lives, to think about how we can be far more effective, loving, caring human beings and make a difference in the world around us? So that's just something to think about. When you hear Moses saying he's clumsy and he's not sure what he should make of it, you shouldn't feel alone when you're feeling the same way. That you should also feel like, if I don't know what I should do, I should think about it, pray on it, look into it, and do the best I can, and the best you can will keep moving you on the path that will, I think, will truly transform your life and make you a better person, as well as help create heaven on earth. Because I do believe that we all have the potential to help create heaven on earth, and even on a little micro scale with our own family and friends. And then it spreads out to our community when people can feel that same love that flows into everybody around them that they run in contact with. So Aaron's staff becomes a serpent. So going on to Exodus 7, Aaron, who works with Moses, he throws the staff to the ground. Basically, the staff turns into a serpent, and then I guess the Pharaoh says, no big deal. I can have my little minions throw some of their staffs down and do the same thing. But then it turns out that Aaron's staff consumes the other staffs, right? So then all of a sudden, and keep in mind, God said he's going to do things that the Pharaoh will not believe and will still have a hardened heart. And so this was like one of the first ones. Next, he turns around and he turns all the water in Egypt into blood, right? I'm assuming this is real blood. Maybe, I've never really gotten a straight answer. I think I might have looked into this before, but but it's red, and it's like we think about like Florida. A lot of the fish die because of red tide. Sometimes, so when I read this, I'm like, blood. Is it red tide, or was it truly blood? But it doesn't change the fact that all the water everywhere, even in containers and drinking jugs and everything, turned to blood. Okay, and so that was another miracle that was shown. And so then, all the fish died. The Egyptians couldn't drink the water. But meanwhile, they started to dig along the riverbank to find drinking water because they couldn't drink the water from the Nile. So I did think that was an interesting point to think about. Shouldn't the water all have turned to blood in the area, even if it was not part of the Nile? But I'm not exactly sure if, what that means, if there was any significance to that statement that they were able to find water that was not part of the Nile, that was not blood. Anyways, it just seemed it struck me as a little odd. 7 days passed from the time the Lord struck the Nile. Okay, so now I guess we're going to hear about more tomorrow because we're on to Matthew 18. so that's the water, the river turning red, the Nile turning red like blood, and the staffs. And I think there's a few other miracles that we'll hear about in tomorrow's readings. But now we're on to Matthew number 18. And then Peter came to him and asked, Lord, how often should I forgive someone who sins against me? 7 times. No, not 7 times, Jesus replied, but 70 times 7. So I want you guys to think about that. So when somebody sins against you, Jesus isn't saying you're gonna get over it after 77 times, or after 7 times, or 1 week. He's basically telling you, it might take you guys like a year and a half. And that's basically forgiving that person every single day, for a year and a half before you truly forgive a person that sinned against you. And there's a lot to be said about that, folks. Is you think about your own life and how long you can hold a grudge against anybody, family member, friend, how long it takes for you to get over something that was done to you that you felt was wrong, in any capacity, in a workplace, etc. I think a year and a half is probably a pretty good estimate. 490 days, not exactly a year and a half, maybe a year and a quarter, a year and a third. That's what it seems to be more like, because 70 times 70 is 490, so it's an extra 125 days, so 365 in a year, so a little less than a third. So anyways, 1 1/3 years for you to really forgive the person if you wanted to. And so therefore the kingdom of heaven can be compared to a king who decided to bring his accounts up to date and servants who had borrowed money from him. In the process, one of the debtors was brought in who owed him millions of dollars. He couldn't pay, and his master ordered that he be sold, along with his wife, his children, and everything he owned, to pay the debt. But the man fell down before his master and begged him, "Please be patient. I will pay it all." Then his master was filled with pity for him, and he released him and forgave the debt. But when the man left the king, he went to his fellow servant who owed him a few $1,000s. He grabbed him by the throat and demanded instant payment. His fellow servant fell down before him and begged, "A little more time, be patient, I will pay it back." But his creditor wouldn't wait. He had the man arrested and put into prison until the debt could be paid in full. When some of the other servants saw this, they were very upset. They went to the king, and they told him everything that had happened. Then the king called in the man he had forgiven and said, "You evil servant, I forgave you that tremendous debt because you pleaded with me. Shouldn't you have mercy on your fellow servant just as I had mercy on you?" Then the angry king sent the man to prison and to be tortured until he had paid his entire debt. That's what my heavenly Father will do to you if you refuse to forgive your brothers and sisters from your heart. Now, I got to tell you, folks, that's a pretty powerful lesson here that Matthew. There's a reason why my confirmation name was Matthew. I always had an affinity for Matthew, and I got to tell you, he has a way with words and really explaining things. If we all know that we're granted mercy from God for various mistakes that we've made throughout our life, and that God loves us unconditionally, and He forgives us when we make mistakes. And He tries to help us along the way and give us insights through dreams, through thoughts, through anytime we pray and ask for help. That if we truly recognize it and appreciate it, that we had some help, right? That's the big thing. We acknowledge that we had help from a higher power, that this higher power took the time to flow energy, flow thoughts, throw blessings into our lives to make a difference. How much different would the world look if the people that have felt these blessings just paid it forward or passed it through to other people, passed through some of their blessings? Maybe they don't capture the entire blessing. Maybe if you feel blessed, and if you were to put a number on it, so to speak, and you felt like you had 1,000 units of blessing, and then somebody comes to you and they're down on their luck, and you can somehow make their life a little better or a little less stressful, even if they didn't owe you anything, just different ways. You took the time to help, and maybe you can you use up 50 of your 1,000 blessings that you received. How is anybody worse off in that situation? You're still up 950. And I know it sounds a little funny to people, but I do think having some type of mental accounting of sorts, even if it's not exactly dollars and cents, but just emotional accounting of how things make you feel, and trying to recognize it, how it makes you feel, and how better of a spouse you are, or how better of a parent you are, that when you receive those blessings and you realize that other people might have made mistakes, is there a way to take the mistakes that they've made and turn them into a lesson that can also help them grow as a person and feel that they've been blessed, that you've had the decency and the mercy to let them out of their mistake, so to speak, if they've made a mistake and you were on the other side of it, sort of. And so it's a very interesting concept. I do think that people. I think it's rare. I'm not gonna deny the fact that it's extremely rare that somebody behaves this way. I do think it's something that maybe we can strive to do. We probably do it more with family than we realize that we're doing it. If we think about it in this context, sometimes more with family and friends, and this runs in the face of traditional corporate America and business, folks. You can't operate companies this way. You can't, because there's a bunch of laws on the books that do not allow such things to happen. So the only way you can bypass this type of thing, so corporate America, this can never happen. This can't really happen in government either, because of the way the laws are written. It has to be done on a micro level in the private sector with entrepreneurs and small business owners and small families and groups. And this is partly one of the reasons why frankly they might be attacking the entrepreneurship class of this country, the families of this country, breaking up the families, trying to destroy small business owners, because they know that if they eliminate this sort of humanity among us, they'll have an easier way of controlling us. Because when you receive mercy from God and you receive a blessing where you know you didn't really deserve it, and you had your slate wiped clean, and you pass it forward to other people, and then you wipe their slate clean. That's a pretty powerful way to go into the world and stay in the world, where you realize and you're humbled by the fact that you are part of a bigger, body of Christ, so to speak. You're a spirit in Christ, and that you have responsibilities that you maybe didn't think you had before. You do feel a sense of reciprocity, that you have to give back to what you've received, because of the gift that you've received is so unquantifiable for how it's completely changed your life and your existence, that you want to also change the life and existence of others that cross paths with you. So that's my takeaway of that story. So now we're on to Matthew 19. When Jesus had finished saying these things, he left Galilee and went down to the region of Judea east of Jordan River. Large crowds followed there, and he healed their sick. Haven't you read the scriptures? Jesus responded. They recorded from the beginning God made them male and female. And he said, this explains why a man leaves his father and a mother is joined to his wife, and the two are united into one. Since they are no longer two but one, let no one split apart what God has joined together. Then why did Moses say in the law that a man could give his wife written notice of a divorce and send her away? Jesus replied, Moses permitted divorce only as a concession to your hard hearts, but it was not what God had originally intended. And I tell you this, whoever divorces his wife and marries someone else commits adultery, unless his wife has been unfaithful. Jesus' disciples said to him, if this is the case, it is better not to marry. Not everyone can accept this statement, Jesus said. Only those whom God helps. Some are born as eunuchs, some are made eunuchs by others, and some choose not to marry for the sake of the kingdom of heaven. Let anyone accept this who can. Okay, so obviously this hits home for me, maybe more than most out there. I'm not sure how many people are watching that have gone through a divorce and so forth. I was married for over 15 years to my first wife. I was with her for 18 years. We had 2 children together. And, keep in mind, my parents were married 58 years. So my parents were married 58 years. I did not believe in divorce. However, whatever things happened in my life with my first wife, that we grew apart. We, for whatever reason, things just didn't work out. We tried to make it work. I think, I fought pretty hard. I didn't really believe in divorce. I didn't want anything to do with it because of my upbringing. But for whatever reason, I didn't really think back to this passage. Maybe I'm not sure how God works on some of this stuff. And so we decided to separate. And so during that separation period, we did see other people. And because, we were separated. And so we weren't having any relations with each other. We decided to separate from each other and see if after that separation period, we wanted to try to make the marriage work. Now, keep in mind that once that kind of happens, reading this, it's kind of obvious, but I didn't really think about this at the time that we did this. We just kind of tried to think of it from, I guess what people, you hear about in the world around you, that, hey, if you want to separate, you should see if you still want to be together, just separate from your spouse and see if you really want to still be together after you're separated, kind of thing. So the moment that happened, I guess, in some respects, God would say that I failed as a husband, that I permitted my wife to go commit adultery, right? Because we were still legally married. I guess we were still married in the eyes of the church. but she went to see other people. I have no idea if she did or etc. I'm assuming she might have, and I know that I dated some other women and stuff, and so forth. So we kind of violated this covenant of marriage. So you can say that I guess you can make the argument in religious terms that we both committed adultery. And I didn't lie about this. I filled out all the information to the Catholic Church because I asked to get my marriage annulled because I kind of found out about this afterwards. I said, I want to get remarried. My first marriage didn't work out. I don't believe in divorce. And then as they had all this stuff fill out everything, they said, well, you do have grounds for divorce. You both committed adultery. It's a tough pill to swallow, folks, because you agreed to it and you agreed, and my ex agreed and I agreed to see other people, and we saw other people. It doesn't make it any easier when you're told that, yes, you can be granted this annulment, that your marriage is no longer valid in the church's eyes, and then you can break apart energetically from a spiritual level, and you can make yourself available to be remarried, so to speak. And it was obviously a sad experience, and it's a sad and yet conflicting experience, because if that didn't happen, she wouldn't have met the person that she met, that I think makes her pretty happy. Like I'm assuming so. I think they're engaged to be married, and I wouldn't have met my wife, who I'm married to now for, I guess, about 5 years, 4.5 years or so. And, we're on child number 3 together. So, it's kind of tough, because it's like, well, if you didn't do this, this wouldn't have happened. Since you did this, this happened. And, I do know that I do intend on kind of like staying married until I die, until my wife dies. That was the spirit of me going into marriage. I do believe that. Call me old fashioned. I don't believe in, I don't know what's the word, like, you just keep doing it because it's convenient, but when it's no longer convenient, you go separate ways. I do think we all ebb and flow as human beings. We run into, each of us may run into a various rut, and part of finding the right partner or being married is to ride out those storms together. And I do believe in that, and I do believe that my wife that I have now shares that sentiment, maybe a little more than the first one. So, I don't know, like I said, it's tough to gauge. I don't judge, my ex for anything. I think she loves the 2 children we have together. And, I know that I love my 2 children that I had with her, and, I don't wish her any ill will, and I'm hopeful that she doesn't wish me any ill will. But that's not anything I can control, so I wouldn't be mad if she does. So it's just, that's something that she needs to come to grips with, if she's still angry about what she thinks should have been, and if we, could have done things differently, because there's nothing we could have done differently that didn't result in what happened. So that's kind of it. It's like, okay, it wasn't meant to be, because we obviously went on 2 separate paths, and there's 2 completely different sets of events and different people in each of our lives. So I don't regret anything, and I'm sure hopeful that she doesn't regret anything, and we both created new lives from our situation. And this is also one of the blessings of Christ. Christ forgives us all for any sins that we've committed, even when we didn't realize we were committing them. So I didn't realize that this was such a large infraction, so to speak. And being a religious person my whole life, I just I thought it was a pretty big ordeal to get your marriage annulled, to get remarried, because getting remarried in the church was important to me. But I did kind of learn about this whole thing afterwards. But I sure as heck don't remember it any earlier, before I ever got married. So anyways, let that be a warning to anybody out there who's never been married, that they understand what they're signing up for, that it's an energetic union, and that you need to be aware of how serious it is in the eyes of God and the church and so forth. So anyways, let's go to Psalm of David. The Lord is my shepherd. I have all that I need. He lets me rest in green meadows. He leads me beside peaceful streams. He renews my strength. He guides me along right paths, bringing honor to his name. Even when I walk through the darkest valley, I will not be afraid, for you are close beside me. Your rod and your staff protect and comfort me. You prepare a feast for me in the presence of my enemies. You honor me by anointing my head with oil. My cup overflows with blessings. Surely your goodness and unfailing love will pursue me all the days of my life, and I will live in the house of the Lord forever. And so, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want, right? We've all kind of heard that in church. It's a pretty common theme, common phrase. And, obviously I'm not a big fan of the connotation of us being viewed as sheep. I've never liked that aspect of it. I understand, God is our shepherd, but I don't like the connotation of being a sheep. I never have, and maybe I'm not alone on that one. But what I will say is that I'd rather be, the Lord is my coach. The Lord is my spiritual guide. I like that a little more than shepherd, but I understand the reference to shepherd. I guess maybe it should be updated a little bit, in my humble opinion, versus shepherd, because I still will not like the concept of being a sheep. But I do believe that Jesus Christ, Lord, God, does want us to thrive, and that he wants to create an environment for us to thrive, and that he shows us the way to thrive through the Word of God that's encompassed in the Bible, and in great works and great stories and analogies. These stories, I really don't ever get caught up on whether or not they're all real, that they all took place. And there's a side of me that sometimes thinks that they're analogies, or they're literally just, they're figurative stories. And, I think some are definitely literal, and some are they might be figurative, but I'm not smart enough to figure out which is which. And frankly, I don't really care to learn which ones are which. It's not important to me. What's far more important than whether or not the stories in the Bible, how many are literal and how many are figurative, is the lessons learned from the stories. And so the lessons learned from the stories express this concept from this reading, about the Lord is my shepherd, because all these stories are a way of shepherding our soul and our spirit through this life on earth while we're here for the short period of time that we're here. Whether we're here for, whatever. Some people are here for days or hours or minutes, and some people are here for, over 100 years, and everybody in between. We never really know when our number is up, but I do think that it is wonderful to know that while we're conscious and while we're aware of what the environment that we're in, and we're reading and we're taking the time to learn all these things, that we can be an active participant with the shepherd, and maybe we can be a co-shepherd of our own life, so to speak, instead of being a sheep. That we're like, hey, you got all these great rules, let's take a look at what they are and why we should follow them. And so maybe that would be an easier way for some people to accept this concept of the shepherd. Maybe we both are taught how to live in this life alongside Christ and the teachings of Christ, and make good decisions to, have a fertile environment that we live in, not just for ourselves, but for our children and for our communities. And so maybe that's the main point of the analogy and so forth. So anyways, that's that one. So here I'm on to Proverbs 5. An evil man is held captive by his own sins. There are ropes that catch and hold him. He will die for lack of self-control. He will be lost because of his great foolishness. And so, when you do something, like when you sin or you do something you shouldn't do, in a lot of respects, it is a bit like quicksand. You can continue to be pulled down into it over and over as you try to get out of what you just did, especially after you recognize what you just did. And so the concept of how do you solve that if you commit a sin is the best way to do it. At least from my perspective and what I've observed, is you acknowledge that you've committed the sin, acknowledge it with your God, acknowledge it with yourself, and try to address it head on and face the consequences. Now, we happen to live in a world where a lot of people do not want to face the consequences for any actions when they make a mistake. I don't know why this is the case. I do know that it's very common that people don't want to face the music for what they have done. And I have to admit that I've never felt that way. When I make mistakes, I take the full consequences, even when it sets me back. Call it being stubborn, call it my upbringing. I'm not sure why. I just think that way, and it's not a foreign concept to me. If I screw up, I'll admit I screw up. When I do things on behalf of clients, for example, I make a mistake. I explain when I make a mistake. But at the same time, I take a very strong line when I don't make a mistake and they think I did. I'll hold the line and say, no, I didn't make that mistake. If I did, I would acknowledge it. So there's a very strict code that I guess I've always lived with throughout my life when I do things, that I don't need to guess when I'm trying to pull a fast one, or so to speak. I know what my truth is and what my barometer is when I make decisions. What you see is what you get. And so a lot of my life, I've been told a lot of times that, people love me or they hate me. It's kind of funny, but I get a kick out of that because it's like, what's there to hate about me? I just joke around, folks. I guess some people hate some of my attributes because I guess I'm viewed as someone who sees the world in black and white. And now I understand there's different circumstances and shades of gray, so to speak. But I know for me, I like to stay very focused and structured and do things that I know what my actions will lead to, what the consequences will be. Now, I don't mind upside surprises, folks. I kind of like, having low expectations of what's going to happen. I know that sounds a little trivial, but when I do something, I don't have any huge expectations of how I will be rewarded for what I'm doing. And then as a result, I give it my all and just see what happens with the rewards. And so I would tell you that if you try to structure your life that way, where you give it your all, assuming you'll get nothing in return, anything that shows up is just a gigantic gift. So you always feel like you won the lotto. And it's a mindset. And I think that I've learned how to do that throughout my entire existence. Like, at least, being 45, I don't know exactly when it kicked into how I live my life, but I just know that I'm a far happier person when I have no expectations by the work that I do and then seeing what happens. But the key is whatever I end up doing or what I agree to do and so forth, I know that if I agree to do it, I have a standard where I'm going to give it my all. So I choose my spots very carefully. If I agree to do something, I try not to ever agree to do something that I'm not going to follow through on, because that would cause too much confusion in the way I operate. I wouldn't like that process. And so I try to keep my life simple. It's like, I agreed to do that. I know I need to do it. I'm not sure if I want to do that. I'm not committing to doing it. I'm not going to say, well, maybe I'll do it. I don't like that. It's like, yes or no. And I do, it's in the Star Wars movie, I think, there is no try. It's either do or don't do. It's one or the other. And I do believe in that philosophy. And so when I hear this on Proverbs, when people are held captive by their own sins, so to speak, if you know the impact or the effect that doing wrong things will have, not just in that moment in time on your life, but how much it'll impact the other things that you're doing that are good, that alone should give you reason for pause. And I think part of this being you'll be captive by those sins, it sucks up your time and energy from doing the things you should be doing. So I'll give you an example, since we talked about the adultery in the first part of Matthew, I guess, or Matthew 18. For people out there that do things that they shouldn't do, like, for example, cheat on their spouse, and we'll just relate it to Proverbs number 5. If you cheat on your spouse, or you cheat on a friend, or you cheat, like whatever, you cheat on a relationship, think of how much it crushes your productivity. Your productivity as a friend, your productivity on your job, your productivity as a parent, because you're a prisoner of knowing what you did, that nobody else needs to know it, but you know it, and maybe that other person that you're doing this with, but you destroy your sense of what's right and just in this world, and you're living an illusion, you're living a fraud. And so, this is why it says they're the ropes that catch and hold them. You're kind of stuck in your own trap. You're stuck in your own quicksand, and you'll die for lack of self-control. So I think when I hear this, the death that is occurring is the death of your spirit and your death of your soul, that you're losing part of yourself permanently by the actions that you took. And you'll be lost because of this great foolishness. So the longer it carries on, the more difficult it is to get out of the quicksand, and you'll fully be submerged by the quicksand, and you'll perish. And so, a lot of times when you think you should do something, or you're contemplating of doing something that you shouldn't, my suggestion is wait a day, wait a week. Delay. When you don't have enough information to make a good decision, sleep on it. Wait another day, wait another week, wait another month, but drag it out. There's a lot of value into doing nothing. Let me repeat that again. There's a tremendous amount of value to be had in your life in reducing the stress and the complication, not just for yourself, but other people that matter to your life, by delaying the decision that you think you want to make. And so you've heard it before. I'll say it again. We should sleep on it. You've heard that over your lifetime, I'm sure. It's a very common phrase in our culture. I want to sleep on it. Give me a couple days. There's a reason why when you sign a contract to purchase a home, you have 72 hours to get out. Okay? Because the laws even know that people should have the ability to reverse the decision if it was in fact not the right decision for them. And so that's the reason why the laws reflect this concept that, you should sleep on it, and you should have a couple of outs. Now just imagine if you created a structure and situation for your own life where you did the same thing. Think of how many fewer mistakes you would make, and how many less complications you would have to try to unwind in the future. So with that being said, we are done for the evening. I hope everybody has an absolutely wonderful evening. Thank you so much for listening. May God bless you. May God bless your family and friends. And may God continue to bless the greatest nation in the history of the world. May peace be with you. And if you don't have peace, I do know that if you put God first, I have no doubt that you'll find it. So with that being said, have a wonderful evening, and I will see you guys tomorrow. Thank you.